Have you ever walked through the wrong door and found an entirely new life waiting? She was just looking for a place to crash after a draining family event, but instead she opened the door to a stranger's suite. And what happened next changed everything. That stranger turned out to be a world-famous architect, someone who had graced the cover of Forbes. But the real twist, he didn't push her away. He invited her in, not out of pity, but because he saw her, truly saw her. This story echoes hundreds of real confessions, women who've been overlooked, underestimated, but still rebuilt themselves with bare hands and quiet pride. Watch until the end, and you'll understand how a midnight meal can heal a years-old wound, why sometimes the wrong room is the right turn, and the reason you don't need to shrink yourself to be worthy of love. Naomi Grant, 39, broke an engagement, jobless and rebuilding from scratch by making handmade cards. One lost weekend changed everything when a man she barely knew told her, "You don't have to prove anything, you already are enough." And for the first time, she believed it. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, don't skip this story, because sometimes all it takes is one person to say, "I see you." Naomi Grant was just trying to survive her cousin's wedding weekend without collapsing or snapping. At 39, she'd mastered the art of biting her tongue through awkward family reunions and forced smiles. But 6 hours in too tight heels, wearing a lilac satin bridesmaid dress that clung in all the wrong places, had her teetering on the edge. She limped down the plush hallway of the Valier Hotel, shoes in hand now, because screw appearances. She had no one left to impress and nothing left to lose. The rehearsal dinner had been a disaster. Somehow, despite months of planning, her name had been left off the catering list. No seat, no plate, no apology. Classic Tiffany. "Girl, just roll with it," her cousin had chirped, already 2 glasses of champagne deep. "You can eat later." That later never came. So now Naomi was running on a granola bar caffeine and pure spite. She clutched the room key tighter, rereading the text Tiffany sent her an hour ago. "Room 1507. You're with Denise." Denise was another bridesmaid she barely knew, but at this point a bed and silence sounded like heaven. Her fingers fumbled the card as she counted door numbers: 1501, 1503, 1505. There it was. She slid the key in. Red light. Tried again. Still red. Naomi stared at the glowing indicator like it had personally betrayed her. She double-checked the number. 1507, she muttered. "This is 1507. Maybe Denise had locked the manual latch. With a sigh born of hunger, humiliation, and high heels, Naomi knocked gently. The door swung open almost immediately. But it wasn't Denise. It was a man. Tall, barefoot, mid-40s maybe. Loose navy dress pants, white shirt unbuttoned at the top sleeves, rolled casually. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it in frustration or contemplation. A glass of red wine dangled from one hand. He tilted his head. "You're definitely not room service." Naomi froze. For a full 3 seconds her brain refused to reboot. She tried to speak, then failed. Finally, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I must have the wrong." "It's fine," he said, smiling faintly. "You don't look like a threat. I was just, looking for my room. 1507. He chuckled. "This is 1507, but I think you're meant for a different wing. This one's the executive side." And there it was. Of course, Tiffany booked him in luxury and stuck Naomi wherever the hotel had vacancy. "Well, that makes sense," she muttered. The man didn't close the door. Instead, he leaned against the frame, eyes studying her, not in a creepy way, but like he was trying to figure out which part of her didn't belong. Naomi suddenly felt very aware of her tangled curls, the creased dress, the faint smudge of mascara under one eye. "You look like you've had one hell of a day," he said. "That obvious, huh?" He nodded, then glanced behind him. "I was about to order room service. You hungry?" She blinked. "Are you serious?" "Deadly. I hate eating alone, and you look like you could use a plate more than I could." Naomi opened her mouth, ready to politely decline, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud, aggressive growl. The man smiled. That's a yes, he said, stepping aside. Come in. Naomi hesitated, then slowly crossed the threshold, clutching her shoes and dignity like a shield. The suite was bigger than her entire apartment back home. Sleek furniture, tall windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, ambient jazz playing softly from hidden speakers. I promise I'm not a serial killer, he added, grabbing a menu from the table. Julian Wade, by the way. She turned to look at him sharply. Wait, Julian Wade. Like the designer. He gave a sheepish smile. Guilty. Naomi blinked, almost laughing. Of course. Of all people to accidentally barge in on it, had to be that Julian Wade, the architect, whose minimalist designs were splashed across every luxury magazine cover for the last decade. And here she was in bare feet, smelling like drugstore hairspray and desperation. I'm Naomi, she said at last, setting her shoes down quietly. Naomi Grant. Well, Naomi Grant, he said, tapping the phone to call room service. What do you say to truffle fries, mini sliders, and something ridiculously chocolatey for dessert? Naomi's stomach did a little backflip. Say yes, he added over his shoulder. It's good stuff. She exhaled slowly. Yeah, okay, just this once. Good choice. As he placed the order with casual efficiency, Naomi took a seat by the window, tucking one leg under the other. The lights below glittered like someone had spilled diamonds across the streets of Manhattan. She glanced at Julian, who was now pouring her a glass of water. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was oddly comforting. You sure you don't mind? She asked, voice softer now. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Honestly, I've had a long day too, and for once, I'd rather share it with someone real. Naomi didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, and for the first time that day, she stopped feeling invisible. Julian set down the water in front of her with the kind of ease that came from hosting more business dinners than he could count. But this Naomi sitting barefoot at his window in a wrinkled bridesmaid dress, this was different, and he knew it. Naomi took the glass, her fingers brushing his lightly. Thanks, she said, her voice steady now, more grounded. He poured himself a drink and sat across from her, not at the desk or couch, but at the same little round table by the window-level ground. So he began, What's your story, Naomi Grant? Because I get the sense you didn't just wander into a stranger's suite for the thrill of it. She snorted. You're right. I'm not that spontaneous. A pause. Honestly, I'm just here for my cousin's wedding. Was supposed to share a room with another bridesmaid, but clearly the hotel had different ideas. One of those weekends. You have no idea, she said with a dry laugh. Let's just say, family dynamics are not the fairy tale version right now. I spent the last 6 hours trying to be invisible and still somehow managed to be a problem. Julian leaned back in his chair. That's quite a talent. I know, right? She chuckled bitterly. One minute, I'm helping Tiffany pick out centerpiece colors. The next, I'm standing at the back of a ballroom with no seat, no food, and no clue why I showed up in the first place. Damn. He didn't sugarcoat it, just nodded like someone who knew what being left out felt like. Naomi sipped her water, trying to ignore how comfortable she felt opening up to this man. She barely knew him, and yet maybe that's why it felt safe. I used to be a corporate events coordinator, she said suddenly. Pretty good at it too. Big brand launches, conferences, galas. Then budget cuts happened. Got laid off 6 months ago. Been trying to freelance since then, but New York doesn't exactly roll out the welcome mat for struggling creatives. Julian listened without interrupting, his gaze steady, not judging, just listening. I started making cards again, she continued, quieter now. Handmade ones. Pressed flowers, recycled paper stuff my grandma taught me when I was little. It doesn't pay rent, but it keeps me sane. That's not nothing, he said. It's honest work. Creative. Personal. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Tell that to Sally Mae and my landlord. He smiled at that. Fair. For a moment silence settled between them again, but not the heavy kind. This was more like exhale. Naomi looked over at him. What about you? You're Julian Wade. You design buildings. win awards, probably have a calendar full of people trying to get 5 minutes of your time. Why are you in a hotel suite eating room service alone? Julian considered that for a second. Because I skipped the gala I was supposed to be at tonight. Couldn't stomach another night of champagne handshakes and what's next for Wade and Partners questions. She tilted her head. That bad, huh? He shrugged. Don't get me wrong, I built a good thing. The firm, the brand. But somewhere along the way it stopped feeling like mine. Now it's about boardrooms and bottom lines. Safe design for rich people who want another beige penthouse. Naomi laughed surprised. Beige, the color of ambition. Exactly, he grinned. I used to sketch furniture by hand. Real stuff. Tables with stories, lamps inspired by jazz records. Now it's all algorithms and deliverables. She studied him for a moment, the guarded way he spoke about success. You ever think about going back to designing for joy instead of approval? Julian didn't answer right away. But then he said, yeah, lately more than ever. Their eyes met then, and for a second, it was like something shifted in the room. Some subtle gravity pulling two worn-out souls into the same quiet orbit. A knock at the door broke the spell. Room service. Julian stood, and Naomi sat back as a server wheeled in a cart stacked with covered dishes. She caught a whiff of truffle oil and nearly groaned aloud. I went a little overboard, Julian said, lifting the silver domes. Sliders fries, chocolate mousse, and I added grilled veggies so we feel better about ourselves. Naomi laughed. Balanced. I respect that. They moved to the couch, balancing plates on their laps like old friends instead of strangers. The fries were hot and crisp. The sliders melt in your mouth. Good. Naomi closed her eyes after the first bite. I think I just forgave Tiffany, she muttered. Julian chuckled. Food the great equalizer. They ate mostly in silence, the occasional pass me that, or you gotta try this slipping in naturally. When Naomi finally reached for the mousse, she caught Julian watching her, not in a romantic way, not yet, but with genuine curiosity. What? He shook his head, smiling slightly. Just thinking how glad I am you knocked on the wrong door. Naomi paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. Me too. Though I'm still technically starving at a wedding I wasn't invited to eat at. He raised his glass. To unexpected guests. She clinked hers against his. To room service therapy? They sat back after bellies full, feet bare the city glowing beyond the glass. Naomi tucked her legs up, wrapping her arms around her knees. You know, she said, this is the first time in a long time I've felt seen. Julian didn't say anything. He just looked at her, serious now. You should be seen, he said, a lot more often. And just like that, something opened between them, wordless, fragile, real. It was nearly 1:00 a.m. when Naomi finally glanced at the clock on the wall. Damn, she murmured, shifting on the couch. I didn't realize it was this late. Julian sat across from her, long legs stretched out, the sleeves of his shirt rolled higher now. Guest time moves differently when you're full of sliders and good conversation. She gave him a half smile. I should go. Bridesmaids have to be up at dawn to get glamorized for photos no one will look at twice. Julian stood as she did. Do you know where your actual room is this time? Naomi pulled out her phone, rereading Tiffany's message in the soft light of the suite. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, for she let out a groan and held up the screen. It says 5107, not 1507. I read it wrong. I was off by a whole floor. Julian chuckled. Well, then I guess I owe that typo a thank you. She rolled her eyes but smiled despite herself. Of course, the girl who coordinates events for a living ends up on the wrong floor of the wrong wing in the wrong room. Life's better when it's a little off script. Naomi slipped her shoes back on with a sigh. Her feet protested, but at least she wasn't as heavy as she had been when she arrived emotionally anyway. Julian walked her to the door. Need me to walk you to your actual room? Just to make sure you don't end up crashing someone else's suite. I think I've caused enough hotel confusion for one night, she said, laughing softly. I'll manage. He didn't push, just nodded. But his voice was quieter when he said, I meant what I said earlier. You should be seen, Naomi. Her throat tightened. She didn't have a quick comeback for that one, so she just nodded, clutching the strap of her purse a little tighter. Good night, Julian Wade. Good night, Naomi Grant. She stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind her with a soft click. For a second she stood still, as if she'd passed through some invisible threshold. Then she made her way to the elevator, rode it down to the 5th floor, and found room 5107. This time the card slid through cleanly, the light flashing green. Her actual room. The space was smaller, no skyline view, no jazz humming from hidden speakers, just the faint hum of an old air conditioner and a floral bedspread that had seen better days. She dropped her heels at the foot of the bed and started to unzip the bridesmaid dress, letting it puddle to the floor. After washing her face and tying her hair back, she finally sat on the edge of the mattress. Her stomach was full. Her feet hurt less. Her chest felt warm, like something had been placed gently there and was still radiating heat. She didn't know what to do with it. Naomi glanced at the nightstand and frowned. A piece of paper had been slipped under the door. She reached down, unfolding the thick cardstock. It was a small watercolor painting of a door, soft strokes of blue and gold slightly ajar, with the number 1507 above it. Inside, handwritten in elegant, careful penmanship. If you ever knock by accident again, I'll always answer. Naomi stared at it for a long moment, the kind of stillness where you feel your own breath. She ran her thumb along the edge of the paper. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but it was real. It was something. She placed it gently on the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and slipped under the covers. Outside, the city hummed like it always did, unaware that two strangers had just shared a meal, a story, and maybe a turning point. In the darkness, Naomi thought about her handmade cards, the ones she made at her little table in the East Village, always wondering if they mattered. And now here was this man, this brilliant, world-famous designer, sending her a card. She smiled to herself. Maybe this is what it feels like, to be seen. The knock came just as Naomi finished brushing her teeth. She glanced at the bedside clock, 7:28 a.m. Too early for Tiffany's chaos, maybe, but not impossible. She grabbed the hotel robe and shuffled toward the door, half expecting a bridesmaid in full makeup panic mode. Instead, it was a hotel staffer pushing a silver cart. "Good morning, Ms. Grant," he said with a smile. "Complimentary breakfast delivery." Naomi blinked. I didn't order anything." The young man chuckled. "It's been taken care of." He wheeled the cart inside, removed the covers with the kind of flourish usually reserved for Michelin-starred restaurants, and revealed a spread buttery croissants, a small fruit bowl, eggs cooked just right, 2 large coffees. Then he handed her a small envelope. "Have a great morning," he said, and rolled the cart out, leaving Naomi standing barefoot and confused in the middle of the room. She opened the envelope. The card was simple, elegant, thick paper, hand-painted edges, and in the same crisp handwriting from last night. "Still thinking about the mousse and the woman who made it taste better. Breakfast. Jay." Naomi let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Before she could decide whether to laugh or panic, another knock. A softer one this time. She opened the door, and there he was, Julian Wade, dressed in a pale blue button-up that somehow made his eyes bluer, and jeans that said, "Yes, I may be a design mogul, but I still do laundry." "Too early?" he asked, holding a second coffee. "I figured I'd bring backup." Naomi crossed her arms, robe tied tight around her waist. "You're not kidding with this full-service hospitality, huh?" He smiled. "What can I say? I had a good time last night. I was hoping we could pick up where we left off, minus the sliders." She stepped aside without a word, motioning him in. "Give me 5 minutes to not look like I just fought with a pillow," she said, disappearing into the bathroom. Julian waited by the window, sipping his coffee and watching the city wake up. When Naomi returned, now in jeans and a soft cream sweater, curls brushed into a loose ponytail, he gave a small nod of appreciation. "I almost missed the lilac satin," he teased. She shot him a look. "You try being stuffed into that dress for 12 hours. Fair enough." They sat at the small table, this one, without a view, without ambient jazz. Still, the air between them felt easy again, unforced. Naomi took a sip of coffee, then picked at a croissant. Okay, I'll bite. What's a man like you doing sending breakfast to a bridesmaid he just met? Julian leaned back. I like talking to you. That's rare lately. People usually want something from me. A favor, a deal, exposure. You just talked. Well, to be fair, Naomi said I did eat half your truffle fries. Totally worth it. They smiled at each other, then fell into a natural silence as they ate. Naomi eventually set her fork down, fingers resting on the edge of her plate. So she said slowly, Tell me something real, Mr. Wade. Not your bio. Something you wouldn't put in a feature spread. Julian exhaled. Okay. Real. He paused, fingers lacing around his coffee cup. I was my sister's caretaker for 3 years. Camille. She had ovarian cancer. Passed away 6 years ago. Naomi's expression softened instantly. I'm so sorry. He nodded. She was younger than me. Bright, stubborn, funny as hell. She hated hospitals. Made me sneak in Thai food during chemo. Naomi smiled gently. Sounds like someone I would have liked. She would have liked you too, Julian said, his voice quieter now. After she died, I didn't know what to do with myself. So I buried it. I worked, built the company, took every client. Awards, press, partnerships, all of it. Let me guess, Naomi said none of it filled the space she left. Nope, he replied. It just covered it up. For a moment the city outside fell away. The clinking silverware, the fluorescent hotel light, all of it faded under the weight of shared grief. Naomi spoke next, slower, more careful. I was engaged once, she said, to a man I thought would walk through fire for me. Julian looked at her, saying nothing, inviting her to go on. He walked, she said simply, right into someone else's bed. Julian winced. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, he took more than my heart. Took my savings, my confidence, my job, long story, but the fallout was ugly. She sipped her coffee, hiding behind the steam. I know I'm not the only one who's ever felt like this, she added after a moment. Like you gave the best parts of yourself away, and now you're trying to stitch together what's left. Julian's eyes didn't leave hers. You're not. You're definitely not. And just like that, the honesty between them felt less like a leap and more like a landing. Naomi reached for another strawberry from the fruit bowl, deliberately avoiding Julian's gaze. Her hands were steady, but inside she felt like someone had knocked the wind out of her in the gentlest way possible. She wasn't used to being that open with people, especially not men, especially not ones who had Forbes articles written about them. Julian sat across from her, still quiet, still watching, not pushing, just present. Thanks for listening, she said after a beat. Most people flinch when they hear the messy parts. I don't mind messy, he said. Messy is real. She smiled faintly. Don't say that unless you mean it. My messy comes with late rent, a tiny apartment, and 3 needy houseplants that are basically passive-aggressive roommates. He grinned. I've dated worse. Naomi chuckled, surprised by her own laughter. Oh, really, do tell. Julian leaned back in his chair, tapping a finger against his mug. Let's just say money attracts people who want to be near it more than they want to be near you. Naomi didn't respond immediately, but her expression said she understood. After a moment, he sat up straighter, like he was about to pitch a client. I have a proposition, he said. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Okay. This is usually the part in the movie where the twist happens. No twist, Julian said, his voice easy. Just dinner. She blinked. Dinner. Tonight. After the wedding stuff. Just you and me, someplace low-key. No suits, no gowns, no wedding DJs playing Shout for the 3rd time. Naomi hesitated. You don't even know what kind of day I'll have. I might be trapped in Toll and lip gloss until midnight. I can be patient, he said. He exhaled, tone softening. I'd like to see you again. Naomi looked down at her hands. This man was sincere. She felt it. No game, no lines. Just a man asking for more time. And yet, there's more? He added, reading her pause like a book. I have a car heading back to New York tomorrow morning. I'd like to offer you a ride. No pressure, no expectations. Just company for the road. That stopped her cold. A ride, she echoed. Like, together. Yes, just you and me. My driver, Frank, he's a good guy. It's comfortable. No trains, no dragging luggage, just conversation and coffee. Maybe a breakfast stop if we're lucky. Naomi laughed despite herself. You really do know how to pitch a girl? I don't do this often, Julian said suddenly, more serious. Honestly, I don't know what this is, Naomi. But last night and this morning, it's the most real I've felt in years. I don't want it to end at checkout. That hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't just that he wanted to spend more time. It was that he was willing to say it out loud, like it wasn't a risk. Because it was. To want someone. To let someone see you. Naomi leaned back in her chair and looked out the window. Midtown was fully awake now. Yellow cabs darting, people hurrying to places that mattered. Somewhere down there, Tiffany was probably yelling at someone over a missing flower girl basket. And here she was, sitting in a borrowed robe, hair barely brushed, being invited into something she hadn't dared hope for in a long-time connection. Real grown-up, no-nonsense connection. She turned back to Julian. I don't know. That's fair. I mean, this weekend's already been upside down. I came here thinking I'd fake some smiles, eat cake, and sneak out before the bouquet toss. And now you met me, he said gently. Naomi gave him a look. That sounds dangerously close to overconfidence. He laughed. I mean, statistically speaking, most women don't end up having breakfast with strange men in luxury suites. Most women also don't get offered free rides by millionaires with excellent hair. Julian smirked. So you have noticed the hair? She rolled her eyes. Don't push it. They sat quietly again, a stillness that didn't need to be filled. Then Naomi said, let me think about it. Julian nodded. Take all the time you need. I mean it. No promises. I've rushed into things before, and it didn't end well. I'm not asking for promises, he said. Just honesty. If you want out, say so. But if there's even a small part of you that's curious, I'd love the chance to keep getting to know you. That was the part that got her. Curious. She was curious about how someone like him could be this grounded. About what a quiet Sunday morning might feel like with him. About whether maybe, just maybe, she wasn't crazy for hoping there was still something soft left in the world. Naomi stood and gathered a few dishes on the tray, needing to move. I should probably go get ready before Tiffany decides I've ruined her wedding timeline. Julian stood too. Should I worry that you'll vanish into bridesmaid chaos and never speak to me again? Maybe, she said with a teasing smile, but I'm guessing you have a way of tracking people down. I'm resourceful. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim business card. Just in case, he said, handing it to her. My personal cell's on there. Call or text whenever. Naomi took it, brushing her fingers across the embossed logo. The card felt like money and class. The man in front of her somehow didn't. She glanced up at him. Thanks for the breakfast and the company. Anytime, Julian said. Literally. Just knock. She opened the door for him, and he stepped into the hallway. Before he turned, he said one last thing. I meant what I said, Naomi. You're not invisible. Not here. Then he walked away. Naomi closed the door behind him, heart full and confused and strangely light. She looked down at the card again. Then she smiled. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a woman passing through someone else's story. She felt like maybe finally she had a chapter of her own. Naomi had barely stepped into the bridal suite when the chaos hit her like a wave of perfume and panicked squeals. Where have you been, girl? Tiffany shrieked, already in full glam, lips red and eyes sharper. Denise said you never came back last night. Don't tell me you overslept. Naomi blinked. Good morning to you too. Tiffany narrowed her eyes. Are you wearing yesterday's jeans? Naomi ignored her and made a beeline for the clothing rack where her dress was still hanging untouched and overly pink. Denise looked up from her makeup chair. We thought you got lost or something. But you seem chill. Naomi forced a small smile. Let's just say I had a very different night than expected. Another bridesmaid chimed in. Okay, but wait, are you glowing? You're totally glowing. Naomi felt her face warm. Maybe it's the hotel moisturizer. Denise gave her a side eye. Girl, don't lie. You had a night. Spill it. Naomi shook her head, pulling the dress down and stepping behind the dressing divider. Nothing to spill. I just ran into someone. Someone or someone, Tiffany called out, suddenly interested. Naomi zipped up the dress and peeked around the curtain. Can we not do this right now? I still have to do hair makeup and survive this wedding. But the girls were relentless. Is he cute? Is he rich? Is he staying at this hotel? Naomi rolled her eyes as she sat down at the vanity. Y'all are worse than my Aunt Doreen at Thanksgiving. Still somewhere inside her, beneath the sarcasm and the habit of deflecting something, bloomed a quiet flicker of pride, of curiosity, of something she hadn't felt in a long time, like she was worth asking about. By the time the ceremony started, Naomi had managed to slip back into bridesmaid mode. Smile in place, bouquet in hand, heels clicking in rhythm. But something was different. She didn't feel invisible anymore. Not because she stood out, but because she mattered, even if only to one person. Through the vows and photos and awkward dances, Julian hovered at the edge of her mind. Not in a dreamy fairy tale way, more like a steady presence, a lighthouse she hadn't expected but now couldn't unsee. And when she finally stole a moment alone on the balcony outside the reception hall, phone in hand, heart beating like it hadn't in months, she texted him, "You still hungry? Because I think I just survived an emotional buffet." She stared at the message for 3 seconds, then hit send. It didn't take long. Julian, always. I'm downstairs. Just say the word. She smiled, leaned against the railing, and took a long breath of cool air. Laughter floated up from the dance floor. The bride and groom were slow dancing under too many fairy lights. Naomi didn't feel jealous. She didn't even feel bitter. She just felt ready. Ready for something new. Back inside, she found Tiffany mid-toast, raising a glass and going on about fairy tales and finding your prince. Naomi slipped away before anyone could pull her into the next photo op. Out in the lobby, Julian was waiting near the elevator, dressed down in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans, hands in his pockets, that same quiet smile on his face. "You clean up well," she said as she walked up. "You don't look too bad in pink." She rolled her eyes. "You try stuffing yourself into a corset after 3 mimosas and no air conditioning." He chuckled. "You ready?" Naomi nodded, but then paused. "I haven't said yes to the ride yet." Julian didn't flinch. "I know." But she added, "I think I'm saying yes to dinner." His smile widened. "Then that's more than enough." He offered his arm, and she took it slowly, deliberately, like someone choosing not just a person, but a path. They walked out of the hotel together, past doormen and flower arrangements and the distant echo of party music. And as they stepped into the cool night, Naomi felt a truth settle quietly in her chest. She wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. She was choosing herself. "I know I'm not the only one who's ever felt like this. Like you gave the best parts of yourself away, and now you're trying to stitch together what's left." Naomi slid into the leather seat of Julian's car just after 7 a.m., still blinking sleep from her eyes. The city was just beginning to stir, a soft gray light brushing over the Hudson as they pulled away from the hotel. Frank, Julian's driver, nodded politely through the rearview mirror. "Morning, Ms. Grant." Naomi smiled faintly. "Morning." Julian turned toward her with a to-go coffee in hand. "Extra cream, no sugar. Like last night." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you always this good at remembering details?" "I listen when things matter." She took the cup, hiding her smile behind the lid. For the first 20 minutes they rode in a comfortable quiet, the kind that doesn't feel like something's missing. Naomi watched the trees blur past outside the window, the highway slicing through the sleepy outskirts of town. So Julian finally said, stretching slightly, "I need to ask you something serious." Naomi glanced over. "Okay. Shoot." "Waffles or pancakes?" She snorted. "That's your serious question." "Dead serious. It's a critical part of compatibility." She pretended to think. "Waffles. All day. crispy edges pockets for butter, pancakes, or just floppy bread. Julian exhaled in exaggerated relief. Thank God, we're safe. Let me guess you've walked away from relationships over breakfast preferences. You joke, but someone once dipped toast in orange juice. Naomi gagged. That's not breakfast, that's a crime. They both laughed, and for a moment the car became its own world. Two people in a bubble of shared humor, and the kind of warmth that can only come when no one's trying too hard. About an hour into the drive, they pulled off the highway and stopped at a diner somewhere off Route 17. It was nothing fancy: red booths, laminated menus, a waitress named Ruby who called everyone Han. But Naomi lit up the moment they walked in. This is exactly the kind of place I needed. Julian held the door with a playful bow. After you, Waffle Queen. They slid into a booth near the window. Coffee came fast, and so did the banner. Julian told stories about design school, about building furniture from junkyard scraps when he was 22. Naomi told him about working her first event gig in a church basement with no AC and 30 folding chairs that didn't match. They talked about their favorite movies she loved, old romances with sharp women and slow burns. He liked noir thrillers and anything with Paul Newman. She made fun of his predictable Spotify playlists, and he teased her for still handwriting grocery lists. You know, he said between bites of hash browns, I thought you'd be more impressed with the private car hotel suite. All that. Naomi smirked. I've dated broke men with rich hearts and rich men with broke souls. I know which one matters. That made Julian go quiet for a second. Then he said, That's a hell of a quote. You can use it. Just credit me. When the check came, she reached for her wallet out of reflex. Julian gave her a look. I invited you? Naomi rolled her eyes. Doesn't mean I can't contribute? I get it, he said gently. But let me do this one. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but next time's on me. I know a spot in the East Village that makes grilled cheese worth fighting over. It's a date. They stood and stepped back into the crisp morning. The ride from the diner to the city was quieter, but not heavy. Just reflective. Naomi leaned her head against the window, watching familiar buildings return like old memories. Brooklyn, then Manhattan. By the time they pulled up outside her walk-up, she felt like the weekend had stretched far longer than 3 days. Julian helped her with her bag. He didn't try to come inside, didn't linger awkwardly. He just said, text me when you're settled. No pressure. I just want to know you made it in okay. Naomi looked at him, and for a second she wanted to say more. Wanted to thank him for the space, for not being one of those men who demanded answers or immediate emotion. Instead, she nodded. Thanks for the ride. Julian leaned in, kissed her cheek lightly. Thanks for saying yes. Then he got back in the car, and just like that, he was gone. Naomi climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The smell of lavender and old wood hit her instantly. The same thrifted throw pillows, her creaky bookshelf, the plant by the window that had started drooping while she was gone. It was home, but it felt smaller. Not worse, just quieter. She set her bag down, looked around, and exhaled. A deep, full-body kind of sigh. Her world hadn't changed, not really. But she had, even if just a little. A ping broke the silence. Her phone. Julian, I meant it. I'd love to show you the studio sometime, only if you're curious. Naomi stared at the screen, then typed back, Naomi, curious isn't the word. Send me a time. Naomi stepped into the studio lobby and immediately felt the shift. It wasn't just the glass and steel minimalism or the way the air smelled faintly of cedar and wealth. It was the hush, the curated calm like success had a scent, and everyone inside had been bathed in it since birth. She smoothed a hand over her blazer, olive green, soft corduroy, thrifted but clean, and told herself not to fidget. She didn't have to impress anyone. She was here to visit Julian, not pitch a job. Still, it was hard not to feel like an imposter when the receptionist greeted her with a too-practiced smile and a name that wasn't even asked for. Mr. Wade said to bring you right up, the woman said, already on her feet, already gliding across the floor, like her heels had never known a misstep. Naomi followed, trying not to stare at the walls hung with framed sketches, mood boards, magazine features, Architectural Digest, GQ, Esquire. Julian Wade was not just good, he was known. They reached a set of black framed glass doors. The receptionist tapped once, then opened them. Julian looked up from a long drafting table in the center of the space, sleeves rolled, collar open. There were papers everywhere, models, a laptop balanced on the edge like it lived on caffeine and chaos. When he saw Naomi, something shifted in his posture, a subtle straightening like relief. "Hey," he said, walking toward her. "You made it." Naomi smiled, but it was tight. Would have been hard to get lost with a personal escort. He picked up on it instantly. Too much too soon. "No," she said. "Just new." Julian nodded. "Come on, let me show you around." They moved through the space together, open concept natural light flooding everything. He showed her models of boutique hotels in Lisbon, a high-rise project in Seoul, even a series of limited edition furniture pieces inspired by jazz covers. He lit up, talking about materials balance flow. Naomi listened, genuinely intrigued, but also aware of the way people glanced at her. Not rude, not direct, but sharp enough that she felt it like a question being asked without words. Who is she? Julian seemed oblivious to it, which somehow made it both better and worse. They ended the tour in a glass-walled lounge at the back of the studio. Coffee, leather armchairs, a tiny garden on the balcony, and one man already waiting there, salt and pepper hair, razor-sharp suit phone in one hand, a whiskey neat in the other. "Victor," Julian said. "This is Naomi Grant. Naomi, my partner, Victor Ellis." Victor stood all charm and poise. "A pleasure," he said, shaking her hand with fingers just a little too cold. "Julian's told me." "Well, actually, Julian hasn't told me much. But you've made quite the impression." Naomi smiled politely. "I'll take that as a compliment." Victor sat again, crossing one leg over the other. "So what is it you do, Ms. Grant?" The question was smooth, but Naomi caught the undercurrent. "Why are you here?" She kept her tone steady. "Event design. Mostly freelance now. I also make hand-press cards, small batch, handmade." Victor's brow lifted a millimeter too high. "How artisanal." Julian didn't flinch, but Naomi felt the shift beside her, like something stiffened just beneath his skin. "She's being modest," Julian said. "Naomi has an incredible eye for detail, texture, mood. Her work's intentional in a way most designers forget how to be." Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure, though I imagine you two operate in very different markets." Naomi felt the sting. Not sharp, not brutal, just precise. Like a paper cut, thin and annoying and easy to dismiss if you wanted to. She didn't want to. "I guess that depends on what you think the market is," she said. "People still care about how things make them feel. Whether it's a hand-painted thank you card or a $30 million hotel lobby." Julian turned slightly impressed, proud even, but Victor just sipped his drink. Sentiment sells until it doesn't. Naomi opened her mouth, then closed it. She wasn't here to spar, and she definitely wasn't here to prove she belonged. Julian leaned forward. "We should get going. I promised Naomi lunch." Victor stood with them, all civility again. "Of course. Lovely to meet you, Ms. Grant." "You too." As they walked toward the elevator, Naomi didn't speak. Julian waited until they were inside, and the doors had closed before turning to her. "I'm sorry." Naomi shook her head. "Don't be. That was illuminating." He looked pained. Victor can be a little condescending. Julian winced. He's old school. Comes from a world where everyone's resume is supposed to be printed on marble and name-dropped at cocktail parties. "I'm not mad," Naomi said softly. "I just didn't expect it to hit that fast." They were silent for a beat. "I shouldn't have put you in that room," Julian said. "I wanted you to see the work, the creative stuff, the good stuff. I didn't think about the politics." Naomi looked at him. "Is that what your world is, politics and nice shoes?" "Sometimes. But that's not my world. Not anymore." She folded her arms. Still feels like you live in it. He didn't argue. When they reached the lobby, Naomi paused by the door. I like seeing your work, she said, but I don't know if I like seeing what comes with it. Julian nodded slowly. That's fair. I've spent too many years proving I belong. I don't want to do that in my personal life, too. He stepped closer. You don't have to prove anything to me. Naomi didn't move. I believe you mean that. I'm just not sure the world you live in does. Then she walked out into the New York sun, head high, heart complicated. Naomi sat by her apartment window that night, legs curled beneath her, a cup of chamomile tea going cold in her hands. The city hummed below like it always did. Subway rumbles, distant horns, sirens woven into lullabies. But in her chest something else buzzed, doubt. It had been hours since she left Julian's studio. He'd texted her once. Just a simple, Julian, I'm sorry again. I hope you're okay. She hadn't responded. Not because she was angry, not even because of Victor, but because something about that moment, standing in a glass room, being quietly measured and found lacking, had cracked something open in her. Something old, something raw. She hated how familiar it felt. Years ago, she'd walked into an investment pitch for her card business, back when she believed hard work and a solid idea were enough. She remembered the smirks, the questions that weren't really questions, the way they'd said cute like it was a curse word. And she'd folded. She hadn't walked away from that meeting. She'd shrunk. Tonight she'd done better. She'd spoken up. She'd walked out with her head high. But still that voice inside, the one that had grown sharp and bitter over the years, was whispering again. This is why women like you don't get into rooms like that. Naomi closed her eyes and leaned her head against the window frame. She hated how fast one man's snide comment could unravel all the work she'd done just to feel whole. The next morning she woke to a knock. It was barely 8 a.m. She was still in pajamas, hair in a lopsided bun. She peeked through the peephole, expecting maybe a neighbor or a package. But it was Julian, holding a plant. She opened the door slowly. Hi, he said, already sounding like he knew he was pushing his luck. Naomi blinked. Are you holding a ficus? Julian looked down at the pot. It's actually a rubber tree. You mentioned one of your plants was dying. Naomi crossed her arms. You tracked down a replacement houseplant. I also brought coffee, he added, holding up a tray with 2 cups and apology bagels. Naomi stared at him for a long second, then stepped aside. Okay, she muttered, but the ficus gets a good light. They sat at her tiny kitchen table, knees bumping under the wood, the rubber tree now parked beside a sun-starved pothos. The coffee smelled divine. Julian looked around, taking in the mismatched mugs, the open sketch pad on the counter, the little bowl of hand-cut paper stars on the shelf. This place feels like you, he said. Naomi raised a brow, small and slightly chaotic, honest, warm, unapologetically personal. She didn't reply, just bit into her bagel and waited. Julian set his cup down. I meant what I said about not realizing what it would feel like for you in that room. That's on me. Naomi looked up. I know you didn't mean for it to go that way. But Julian, I live in those rooms. Or more like I've spent my life trying to get into those rooms. He nodded slowly. And then someone like Victor walks in and makes you feel like you never should have tried. Her throat tightened. Yeah. They sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, You shouldn't have to keep proving you deserve a seat at the table. Naomi's voice was quiet. But I do. Julian leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then let me help build a new table. She blinked. Don't say that, she said, tone almost pleading. Don't make promises that sound pretty, but crack under pressure. I'm not promising, he said gently. I'm offering to show up, to listen, to learn. Naomi studied him. Not the suit, not the headlines, not the expensive taste or the studio. Just him. The man who remembered how she took her coffee. The man who showed up at 8 a.m. with a ficus because her plant looked sad. She reached out and traced the edge of her mug. I don't need rescuing, Julian. I know. You've already done the hard part. You rescued yourself. She exhaled. I've worked so hard to rebuild my life from that breakup. From being told I was too sensitive, too ambitious, Not enough and somehow too much at the same time. I see all of it, Julian said, and I'm still here. Her voice cracked. Why? Because I like the woman who made it through all of that and still has the nerve to make beauty out of paper. Naomi let out a shaky laugh. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Julian reached across the table, just brushing her fingers. You don't have to be anything other than what you are, Naomi. Not with me. She looked down at their hands. I don't trust easily. Then let's go slow. She nodded. Julian leaned back, giving her space again. How about lunch next week? No suits. No Victor. Just grilled cheese in the East Village, like you promised. Naomi smiled. You do listen. He stood carefully gathering his coffee and the now empty bagel sleeve. At the door he turned. Text me if the ficus starts giving you attitude. She laughed. He's got to earn his keep first. Julian paused like he wanted to say something else, but didn't. He just smiled, then left. Naomi stood alone in the doorway for a long moment, then turned to the new rubber tree in the corner. It looked oddly regal, like it belonged. She touched one of the leaves gently, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to bend herself to fit someone else's world. Someone had finally stepped into hers. Naomi sat at her work table surrounded by half-finished invitations and watercolor swatches when her phone buzzed. The text was from Julian. Julian would love your eyes on something. New project. No pressure, but it feels like something you'd understand better than I could explain. She reread it twice, then once more. Short, curious, unassuming, but it still made her heart skip in that annoying way it had started to every time he reached out. She texted back. Naomi curiosity officially peaked. When the next afternoon she walked into a converted warehouse tucked along a quiet Brooklyn block, industrial bones still intact, now painted white and flooded with natural light. A canvas. That was the word for it. Julian was already inside, standing beside a long table covered in mock-up sketches and what looked like swatches of flooring. He turned when he heard her. Perfect timing, he said, handing her a coffee. She smirked. You always have my coffee order ready. Should I be flattered or concerned? I'd say impressed, possibly caffeinated. They walked deeper into the space. This is the building, Julian said. We just signed the lease last week. We're turning it into a mixed-use venue. Pop-up shows, community workshops, maybe even wedding receptions. The neighborhood needs something flexible, local, beautiful, but not precious. Naomi looked around. The bones were good, exposed beams, original windows. It felt like a place stories could happen. I love it, she said, already imagining people milling about music, bouncing off brick candles, flickering during intimate gatherings. Julian kept talking, showing her diagrams, concept art, early renderings. But after a while, he stopped and looked at her. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Naomi blinked. What part? All of it, he said. I want your input, your gut, your vision. She tilted her head. Julian, I'm not an architect. I know, and that's exactly why I want you. He moved closer to the table, spread out a sheet covered in notes and furniture layouts. Designers think about materials, clients think about ROI, but you, he pointed at her, you think about people. What makes them feel something? What makes them stay? Naomi folded her arms, not ready to show how much that meant. Okay, she said slowly. What exactly are you asking? I want you to help shape the experience. Flow, mood, sensory moments. Those things you're always talking about. We've got the structure. You bring the soul. She didn't answer right away. This wasn't just a lunch invite or a dinner date. This was something deeper, more vulnerable. You sure this isn't just a diversity play? She asked, half joking, half dead serious. Julian didn't laugh. No, he said, voice low. This is me trusting what I feel when you walk into a space. You notice things no one else sees. You make people feel held. That matters more than a color palette. Naomi looked away for a second. She hated how much she wanted to believe him, but she also hated that small familiar voice creeping back in, don't get comfortable. Don't be the black woman who thinks she belongs just because someone smiled at her with good lighting. Still, she nodded. Okay, I'll look around. The rest of the afternoon, they moved through the space together. Naomi took notes on how the light shifted in each corner. She talked about seating that encouraged gathering, not performance, about scent and temperature, and where the first impression would hit a guest walking in. Julian listened, fully, like there was no one else in the world. Eventually, they ended up outside, seated on the wide stoop. Sun slanting low, kids playing down the block, the hum of the city all around. Naomi sipped the last of her coffee. "You're not what I expected." "Is that a compliment?" "I'm not sure yet." Julian smiled. "Fair." Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned. "Victor just added someone to our Monday meeting. A potential co-investor for the venue project. Name's Marcus Layton." Naomi's breath caught. Julian looked up. "You okay?" She tried to hide it, but it was too late. Julian's voice softened. "Naomi." She stared ahead, jaw tightening. "That name means something." She gave a tight nod. "He's my ex." Julian blinked. "The one you mentioned before?" "The one who blew a hole in my life and walked away whistling." Julian set the phone down, no longer scrolling. "I can pull you from the meeting." "No," she said, too fast. Then again, quieter. "No, I'm okay." Julian didn't press, but his concern was unmistakable. Naomi stood, dusting her hands off. "I should head back. Thanks for today." "Thank you," Julian said. "Really." She started to walk off, then turned back. "If I'm weird Monday, just know it's not you." He gave her a small nod. "It's okay to be weird. Just don't disappear." Naomi looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. Then she turned and walked away, back into the shadow of the buildings, already bracing for the past she thought she'd buried. Monday came with clouds. Not the dramatic storm kind, just gray enough to blur the edges of things. Naomi stared at her reflection in the subway window, not really seeing it. Her hands were steady, but her stomach wasn't convinced. She dressed carefully. Crisp black slacks, a soft ivory blouse, simple earrings. Not flashy, not forgettable. The kind of outfit that said, "I belong here," without having to shout. The meeting was in a downtown conference room, with too much glass and too little warmth. Julian was already there, flipping through documents. He looked up when she entered. "You okay?" he asked, low enough for no one else to hear. "I'm here, aren't I?" He gave her a look, gentle, not patronizing, and nodded. "Let me know if you want to bail." "Any second." She didn't reply. She wouldn't bail, not today. A few minutes later, the door opened again. He walked in like nothing had happened. Like he wasn't a walking page torn out of the chapter she'd burned years ago. Marcus Layton. Same sculpted jaw. Same calculated ease. Navy suit tailored like it was born on him. He shook hands with Victor, first, then Julian. His eyes landed on Naomi last. There was a flicker. Recognition. Surprise. But no shame. Just a polite practice smile. "Naomi," he said, like her name was a pleasant coincidence. She nodded once. "Marcus." Victor glanced between them. "You two know each other?" "We've met," Marcus said smoothly. "Years ago." Naomi was, what was it? A design consultant on that nonprofit project? Naomi felt the heat rise in her chest, but her voice stayed calm. "I was the co-director of that project. You ghosted our final pitch meeting." Marcus chuckled lightly, like it was an anecdote from college. "Well, that was a chaotic time. I'm glad to see you landed on your feet." Julian's jaw tensed. Victor cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The meeting moved on floor plans, budget talk, projected timelines, but Naomi wasn't listening. Not fully. Her body was present. Her mind was fighting ghosts. Every time Marcus spoke, she flinched inwardly. Not because he had power now, but because he'd once made her feel so small. They dated for a year and a half. It ended when he decided she lacked ambition, that her handmade work didn't match the world he was trying to build. He said it kindly, the way some men weaponize reason, quiet, cold, final. He'd made her believe she was just a stepping stone. She'd believed him, until she didn't. Now he sat across the table like none of it mattered. Julian noticed. Not the full story, but enough to feel the tension threading through Naomi's body. At one point, while Victor and Marcus debated acoustics, Julian leaned over and scribbled something in the margin of her notes. "Need air? We can take a break." Naomi shook her head, eyes locked forward. She would not leave the room for him. The meeting dragged on another hour. When it ended, everyone stood shaking hands and smiling like adults do when they agree on the shape of something no one fully controls. Marcus approached Naomi as the others filtered out. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, tone almost admiring. She leveled her gaze. "That makes two of us." "You look good," he offered, eyes skimming her like a buyer assessing a sample. She didn't flinch. "I'm not a surprise. I'm a return on investment." That caught him off guard. Julian appeared beside her, just then, calm and certain. "Naomi," he said, "you want to head out?" She nodded. Marcus smiled like none of it had touched him. "Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." Naomi didn't answer, didn't offer politeness she didn't feel. She walked out of the room beside Julian, spine straight. But once the doors closed behind them, she exhaled, sharp, uneven. They stopped in a hallway lined with cold marble and framed awards. Julian turned to her. "That was him, wasn't it?" She nodded once. He waited, didn't push. Naomi leaned against the wall, folded her arms. "He used to say my work was cute, that it didn't scale, that I was wasting potential on sentiment." Julian's voice was low. "That's not what I see when I look at you." "I know that now," she said, almost to herself. "But when someone looks you in the face and tells you that your version of success is just a hobby, it seeps in. It becomes a voice you fight every time you try something new." Julian stepped closer, not touching her, just offering presence. "You didn't shrink today," he said. "You took the damn room." Naomi met his eyes. "It didn't feel like that." "Then let me be your mirror until you believe it." Her throat tightened. She looked away. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I think I need to be alone for a bit." Julian nodded. "Whatever you need." Naomi turned and walked toward the elevator, heels echoing in the corridor. This time she wasn't running. She was reclaiming space, even if her hands still shook. Naomi didn't cry when she got home. She didn't rage, didn't call her girls, didn't pour a glass of wine and cue up a breakup playlist. She just sat on the floor of her tiny apartment, knees up back against the couch, staring at the rubber plant Julian had brought her days earlier. It was still alive. Stubborn. Green in that quiet, unbothered way some things are when they're just meant to grow. She had replayed the meeting 100 different ways in her head. Marcus's face, his smirk, the way he said her name like it was a line item in a quarterly report, the way Victor didn't even register the tension, and the way Julian watched her, not with pity, not with discomfort, but with that steady, almost inconvenient empathy of someone who really saw her. It terrified her, because when you've built walls high enough to touch the clouds, the first hand that offers to climb them with you feels like a threat, not a gift. The next morning, Naomi didn't go back to the studio. She didn't check her email, didn't answer Julian's texts. There were too gentle, not pushy, and didn't return a voicemail from her friend Maya, who probably just wanted to know how the man was doing. Instead, she went to the bodega around the corner, bought a bunch of peonies she didn't need, and spent the afternoon restocking ink for her presses. She printed 6 new card designs. All of them said nothing about love, only, "You are not small. You survived it." That's the whole sentence. Your worth isn't waiting for permission. She laid them out across the kitchen table, ink still drying, then took a photo. No hashtags, no filters. "Just today, this is enough." She posted it, then turned off her phone. Later that evening, there was a knock at her door. Soft, measured. She opened it slowly, expecting maybe Maya or a neighbor or no one at all. It was Julian. Again, but this time he wasn't holding coffee or a plant or anything at all. Just himself. And in some ways that made it harder. "I know you needed space," he said quietly. "I just wanted to let you know I'm still here." Naomi didn't answer right away. She stepped aside and let him in. They sat across from each other, the silence between them thick but not cold. Julian looked at the cards still laid out across the table. "You made these." Naomi nodded. "Printed them this afternoon." He picked one up, the one that read, "You survived it." That's the whole sentence. He ran a thumb over the edge. "This hit me harder than I expected." She half smiled. "Me too." He looked at her, Then not just her face, but her whole posture. Like someone studying a work of art he didn't want to interpret too quickly. I don't know what it's like, he said, to carry that kind of silence. The kind where your pain doesn't make noise anymore, it just lives in the background, waiting to be triggered. Naomi inhaled slowly. That's exactly what it is, she said. People think heartbreak is screaming and throwing things, but the real stuff, it's quiet. It's what shows up when you're trying to be professional in a room where someone used to own your shame. Julian didn't look away. I hate that he made you feel like that. I hate that I can't erase it. Naomi shrugged. You can't, and you shouldn't try. But I want to be a place where you don't have to armor up. She stared at him, and for once the words didn't twist in her throat. I want that too, she said. Julian leaned back, his gaze steady. So what does it look like from here? You and me? Naomi gave a half laugh. I don't know. Maybe a little awkward, a little slow, a little new. I like new, he said, especially the kind that knows what it took to get here. She looked down at her hands, then up at him. Julian, I can't promise I won't flinch or pull away sometimes. I don't need promises, just presence. Naomi stood slowly, walked over to the table, picked up the last card she hadn't posted. It read, You are allowed to be chosen. She handed it to him. He read it, then looked at her again. And in that moment, without fanfare or perfect words, something opened between them, soft, tender, wide enough to hold their messy truths. They didn't kiss. They didn't label it. They just stood there in the kitchen, the air smelling like peonies and ink and new beginnings. Naomi stood in the middle of the soon-to-be venue space, one hand resting on her hip, the other holding a pencil she'd been chewing unconsciously for the last 10 minutes. Julian leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching her in that way he always did lately, not just admiring her presence, but reading her. You're chewing that pencil like it owes you money, he said, a soft smile tugging at his mouth. She snapped out of her focus. Sorry. Habit. You do that when you're on to something. Naomi looked down at the sketchpad in her hand. Maybe. Julian walked over, careful not to interrupt her thoughts too soon. What are you seeing? She pointed to the left side of the open space. This wall. Too cold. You've got exposed brick, yes, but it's fighting the light from the opposite window. The energy drops here. He nodded. Soften it how? Fabric draping would feel artificial here. What if we added reclaimed wood panels with gaps wide enough to let warm light through mixed texture with intention? Julian's brow lifted. That's brilliant. Naomi smirked. You say that every time I suggest something. Because you keep being brilliant. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks colored anyway. They worked for the rest of the afternoon, like that, passing ideas back and forth, pulling swatches from the materials bin, testing how light played with different surfaces. The two of them moved through the space like musicians riffing different instruments, same song. At one point, Julian paused to stretch, glancing at her as she crouched beside a mood board rearranging photos. You know, he said, I've never had a collaborator who challenged me like this without making it feel like a fight. Naomi looked up. I've never had a collaborator who actually wanted to be challenged. He smiled. Then I guess we're overdue. It felt good, easy, natural. And for a few hours, the rest of the world stayed quiet. Later that week, they had their first official creative pitch meeting with the broader team, Victor included. Naomi wore navy today, structured blazer, high-waisted pants. Her hair was pinned back, her notes were clear, and her confidence was settled. Not loud, not defensive, just unapologetically earned. Julian opened the meeting with a brief, then stepped back and nodded toward Naomi. This is Naomi Grant, he said simply. She's leading the experiential direction on this project. There was a pause. Not a long one. Just enough for Victor's brow to twitch. Naomi took over without missing a beat. She talked about flow, feeling emotional temperature, how guests would remember the space not just through photos, but through scent sound, and the way their shoulders would drop when they walked in. She wasn't pitching. She was inviting. The room listened. Even Victor. Afterward, when the presentation wrapped and people milled around gathering their things, Naomi stepped into the hallway to catch her breath. Not because she was tired, but because speaking truth in a room like that takes energy, even when it lands. Julian joined her a minute later, 2 coffees in hand. You crushed it, he said, offering one to her. Naomi took it. I didn't faint. That's my bar. Let me raise it for you. You were the reason they saw this project as more than steel and funding. You gave it heart. She sipped her coffee and tried not to smile too hard. That means a lot coming from the guy who used to design penthouses in Tokyo. He shrugged. This means more. They stood there for a moment, just long enough for the hallway to empty, when Victor's voice rang from behind them. Well done in there, Naomi. She turned slowly. Thanks. Victor was smiling, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. You've clearly built something of value here. I'll be honest, I had my doubts, but you do seem to have a certain appeal. Naomi's posture didn't change, but something sharpened in her gaze. I don't do this to appeal. I do it because it works. Victor raised a hand like he was smoothing the air. Of course. Of course. I only meant you bring something different. And sometimes different is exactly what the investors want. Julian's jaw twitched. Naomi held his eye. I'm not here as a trend or a checkbox. Victor's tone didn't shift. No one's suggesting that. In fact, there's been interest. A potential brand sponsor might want to come in bigger than expected. Julian narrowed his eyes. Which sponsor? Victor waved vaguely. We'll get into it next meeting. Just something to keep in mind, especially with Naomi's visibility. And just like that, he walked off, leaving behind the faint smell of condescension masked as progress. Naomi exhaled. Not dramatic, just steady. Julian looked at her. You good? She nodded. I'm used to men who smile while erasing you. I'm not him. Naomi looked at him. I want to believe that. He didn't promise her anything. He just stood beside her and didn't flinch. That was enough for now. Julian stared at the email on his screen for a long time. The sender, Victor. Subject line, strategic opportunity. Brand partnership update. Tone polished, professional, and cold. The message outlined a proposed sponsorship from a luxury hospitality brand, massive investment, full press support potential for global attention, and one sentence near the bottom that made Julian's stomach twist. They're aligned with everything we've built, but feel strongly about maintaining a clear brand identity. It's been suggested that Naomi's position be reframed as consultative, non-decision-making, so as not to dilute creative authority. Julian didn't finish the rest. He closed the laptop, rubbed his face with both hands, then opened it again, because reading it twice didn't make it any less disgusting. Later that afternoon, he met Victor at the studio. Victor was already by the sample wall, sipping espresso, flipping through fabric swatches like nothing was on fire. They're offering 6 figures above our projection, Victor said before Julian could open his mouth. Plus full coverage in Design Quarterly. This is the partner. Julian didn't flinch. You mean the one asking us to sideline Naomi because she doesn't match their brand identity? Victor didn't miss a beat. Don't make this personal. It is personal, Julian said flatly. She's a core part of this project. Victor sighed like a man tolerating a younger partner's idealism. Look, I respect the fact that she brings something unique, but they're offering us a seat at the big table. Sometimes that means compromise. Julian crossed his arms. So you're telling me the price of entry is gutting the soul of the project? Victor placed his cup down with precision. I'm telling you, we're not in the business of soul. We're in the business of scale. Julian didn't say anything. His silence was louder than shouting. Victor leaned in, dropping his voice. We've worked too hard to get here. Don't let your personal entanglement cloud your judgment. Julian's jaw clenched. Don't talk about her like she's a complication. Victor raised an eyebrow, then proved she isn't. That night, Naomi didn't come by the studio. She texted Julian. Naomi, brains fried. In production mode today. We'll circle back tomorrow. He didn't tell her about the email. Not yet. Not until he figured out what he was going to do. Because it wasn't just about a contract or a press feature. It was about whether he was the man he thought he was, or just another creative with a conscience until it got inconvenient. He walked to her apartment around 9 p.m., holding nothing but truth and the weight of the decision hanging between them. She opened the door, ink on her fingers, her hair in a loose knot. Hey, she said. "You okay?" "No," he said simply. She let him in. They sat at the kitchen table. Same as always. Julian didn't sugarcoat it. He told her everything. The email, the brand, the request to sideline her. Word for word. Naomi didn't blink, didn't ask him what he said back, didn't try to make it easier for him. She just stared out the window, like her mind was already sorting through the pieces of a world that always found a way to remind her you're welcome, but not too loud. After a long silence, she said, "So what now?" Julian spoke slowly. "Victor wants me to consider the offer, to protect the project, to protect our partnership." Naomi turned to him, eyes calm but cutting. "And what do you want?" "I want to choose what matters." She raised an eyebrow. "That's not an answer." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You matter, not just to me, to this work, to this space. Without you, this project becomes just another pretty building full of empty gestures." Naomi nodded once. "Then you have a choice." He swallowed hard. "I know." She stood, walked to her desk, picked up one of her new designs, this one not printed yet. She brought it back, slid it across the table. Julian looked down at it. 5 words hand-lettered in ink and gold foil. "If I have to shrink, leave me." She said softly, "I've bent myself into someone else's mold too many times. I won't do it again. Not for a man, not for money, not even for you." Julian's heart squeezed. He stood, came around the table, wrapped his arms around her without asking. She let him, for a moment, then pulled back gently. "I love what we're building," she said, "but I can't stay in a room where my voice is negotiable." Julian nodded, barely able to speak. And Naomi, with grace carved from 1,000 quiet battles, placed the card back in his hand and walked toward the door. Not running, not begging, just leaving with her dignity intact. The studio felt different without her. Julian noticed it the second he walked in the next morning. The light still hit the floors the same way. The blueprints were still pinned on the wall. The reclaimed wood panels she'd suggested were stacked neatly in the corner. But the air was hollow. No music playing from her phone. No scent of that lavender oil she always dabbed on her wrist. No humming under her breath as she rearranged mood boards until they felt right. Just silence, and the weight of a decision he hadn't truly made because she'd made it for him. Victor showed up late as usual, carrying his usual smugness and a protein smoothie that looked like regret in a cup. "Well," he asked, tossing his bag on the chair. She took the out. Julian didn't answer. Victor nodded, almost approving. "Told you. She's not built for pressure. Women like that." Julian's voice cut across the room like a blade. "Stop talking." Victor blinked. Julian walked over, slow, composed. "You don't get to talk about her like that. Not here, not ever." Victor laughed, but it was strained. "Come on, Julian. I'm just saying." "No," Julian said, eyes steady. "You're not saying anything, because you have no idea what it takes to walk away from something you built with your whole damn heart just to protect your self-worth." Victor scoffed. "She made a choice. She made the choice. The one I should have made the second that email landed." There was a long silence. Julian looked around the studio. The light, the sketches, the wood. She picked the soul she poured into every corner and felt for the first time how empty it all was without her voice. He'd tried to build something meaningful, but somewhere along the way he'd let someone else price tag the soul of it. And now he had to decide what came next. That afternoon, Naomi was in her apartment, surrounded by the soft sounds of her press running. The rhythm was comforting, ink paper press lift, tangible, honest. No politics, no compromise. She hadn't heard from Julian all day. She didn't expect to. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of hoping men like him would be different. Tired of teaching rooms how to treat her. Tired of having to prove again and again that her voice wasn't charity, it was craft. There was a knock. She paused. The machine wiped her hands, opened the door. It was a courier. No flowers. No gifts. Just a thin envelope with her name written in Julian's handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded sheet of heavy linen paper. On it, typed in crisp black ink, "The project won't go forward without you. I've pulled out of the sponsor deal." Victor's furious. Let him be. You were never the one who had to prove anything. I was. If you still want to build this together on your terms, I'll be at the studio at 7. No pressure, no expectations, just the truth. There was no signature, but it didn't need one. At 6:45, Naomi stood in front of her mirror. No makeup, just lip balm, a soft sweater, the jeans she wore when she wanted to feel grounded. At 7:00, she walked toward the studio, every step measured, every breath, reminding her she wasn't walking back into something broken. She was walking toward a new agreement, one she didn't have to beg for. Julian was inside, sitting on the floor, legs stretched out, head leaned back against the exposed brick. No lighting tricks, no stage, just him. He stood when she entered, but didn't say anything. She closed the door, stood across from him. Finally, she spoke. Why'd you really do it? Julian met her eyes. Because I looked at what we were building, and I realized without you, it wasn't honest. It was polished. It was impressive, but it wasn't real. Naomi folded her arms. You think this fixes it? No, he said. I think it honors it. She let that sit in the room for a moment, then asked, what about Victor? He'll walk, or he won't. I don't care anymore. And the brand? Off the table. If they need me to shrink the people I believe in to write a check, they were never partners. They were buyers. Naomi studied him, and slowly, finally, her posture softened. Okay, she said quietly, then let's build something nobody can buy. Julian's chest eased with the exhale he'd been holding all day. Naomi stepped further in, looked around. This place still needs work. He smiled. So do I. She raised an eyebrow. At least you know? They stood there, two people not perfect, not finished, but finally aligned. Julian reached for her hand. She let him, this time not out of trust, but because she no longer needed to prove she was worthy of it. The venue smelled like cedar and citrus. Naomi noticed it. The second she stepped through the front doors, her intention diffused just right. It was subtle, not overpowering. A gentle hello, not a shout. The soft launch was tonight, and for the first time in a long time, Naomi wasn't walking into a room to prove anything. She was walking in to deliver, to embody, to own. She wore a deep forest green jumpsuit, tailored, effortless, powerful. Her curls framed her face, silver hoops glinting under warm pendant lights. She looked like a woman who knew the difference between being admired and being respected, and didn't need either to feel whole. Julian saw her before she saw him. He was by the bar, sleeves rolled up, talking to a lighting tech about ambiance angles. When his eyes met hers, he didn't grin. He didn't wink. He just nodded. Like there she is. Like he'd been waiting for this version of her to show up all along. The guests arrived slowly. Local artists, boutique owners, community advocates, a few curious donors. No red carpet, no step and repeat banners. Just a space that welcomed them as they were. People moved through the venue in quiet awe, pausing at corners where the scent shifted, the light warmed, the textures surprised. Naomi watched them let their shoulders drop, saw them lean into conversation, saw them breathe differently. It was working. This was what she'd built with every scrap of instinct she'd been told to suppress. Later, as the evening settled into its rhythm, Julian walked up beside her, 2 glasses of hibiscus soda in hand. You seeing it? He asked, handing her one. She took a sip. I'm watching it. He tilted his head. Not the same. She shook her head. Watching means I'm letting it happen. Seeing means I still think I need to direct it. But it doesn't need me right now. It's breathing on its own. Julian smiled. So are you. She glanced at him, a touch amused. Are you flirting with me in my own house? Technically our house. She smirked. You really gonna play that card right now? He leaned in slightly, voice low. I'll play every card you let me. Naomi didn't answer, didn't need to. The way her lips curved was answer enough. At 8:15, the lights dimmed slightly for the keynote. Not a speech, just a few words. From her. Naomi stepped onto the small platform near the front wall. No mic, no podium. Just her. People quieted instinctively, not because she commanded them to, because she'd earned the room. She looked out, not with nerves, but with certainty. 3 years ago she began. I left a gallery exhibit in the city and cried in the parking garage for 20 minutes. There were chuckles, knowing quiet ones. I had just walked through a beautiful space. Expensive lighting, stunning acoustics, and not a single thing in it made me feel like I was meant to be there. I felt like a visitor in someone else's story. She paused. Let that land. And I promised myself if I ever got the chance to build a space, it wouldn't just be beautiful. It would be kind. There was silence again. But the warm kind. The kind that holds. This venue isn't just a space. It's a question. What would the world feel like if we stopped designing for prestige and started designing for presence? She looked around. You don't have to earn your place here. You already belong. Applause rose, not thunderous, but sustained. Real. Naomi stepped down. Julian was waiting near the side wall, eyes glossy, arms crossed like he was holding himself together. That he whispered as she approached was the most intimate mic drop I've ever seen. Naomi exhaled, smiling, not wide, not forced, just real. The night continued with soft music, small bites, and honest conversations. Around 9:30, a woman in her late 50s approached Naomi near the greenery wall. Gray locks, leather clutch, a firm grip in her handshake. I've been going to design events for 20 years, the woman said, and never, not once, have I felt like I belonged in the space. Tonight I forgot to guard my shoulders. I didn't even realize until I sat down. Naomi blinked. The woman held her gaze. You changed something. Not just for yourself. For us. Naomi swallowed, throat tightening. Thank you, she whispered. The woman squeezed her hand once more before disappearing into the crowd. Julian appeared beside her again. Quiet. Present. She didn't look at him, just leaned slightly in his direction. And he matched the movement like muscle memory. They didn't need to say anything. Not yet. The party was winding down. Most of the guests had already filtered out into the night, leaving behind wine-streaked napkins, half-empty glasses, and soft echoes of jazz still humming from the venue speakers. Naomi stood at the glass door, barefoot, now heels dangling from her fingers. Her toes pressed into the smooth concrete floor as she watched the final guests step out under the amber streetlights. Julian came up behind her, jacket, off shirt, untucked tie, abandoned long ago. He handed her a paper cup of ginger tea. Hot, he said. Naomi took it without looking. Thanks. They stood in silence for a long moment. Not the awkward kind. The kind full of unsaid things. Full of knowing. Then Naomi turned and walked slowly outside. Julian followed. They sat together on the front steps of the venue they'd built, shoulder to shoulder, beneath the soft glow of the lantern sconces. Downtown was quiet, but not dead. A few cars hummed past. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed too loudly. A breeze tugged at Naomi's curls. Julian rested his arms on his knees, looking ahead at nothing in particular. You remember when we first stood in this space? He said. Naomi nodded, sipping her tea. You said it had good bones. I said it needed a soul. Julian smiled. You gave it both. She didn't say anything. I keep thinking, he continued, voice quieter now, about the card you gave me. The one with the gold foil. Naomi looked over, cautious. Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded square of thick paper, slightly creased at the edges. He handed it to her. Naomi unfolded it slowly. You are allowed to be chosen. Julian's voice was steady but low. I choose you. Naomi held still. I choose you when the money's on the table, he said. I choose you when the room wants someone quieter. When the world makes you feel like you're too much or not enough. I choose you then, especially then. She stared at him, heart beating like something it hadn't done in years, without fear. You don't have to say anything, he added. You don't owe me a single thing. I just needed you to hear it clear, without expectation. Naomi folded the card slowly, deliberately, and set it on the step between them. I spent years waiting for someone to choose me, she said softly, in rooms where I shrank, with men who needed me to be small so they could feel big. I kept thinking maybe if I worked harder, if I softened more, if I stayed quiet longer, She trailed off, then continued. But I finally realized it wasn't about being chosen. It was about choosing myself first. And when I finally did, you showed up. Julian looked at her, then really looked. No bravado, no charm. Just reverence. Naomi met his gaze. So no, I'm not going to fall into your arms right now. I'm not going to kiss you under this perfect venue light, like it's some movie ending. Julian gave a quiet nod, lips pressed together. But she added, I'm going to let you stay. That made him blink. Naomi smiled, small but real. You don't have to chase me. You just have to stand next to me and keep standing, especially when I can't. Julian exhaled. I can do that. They sat in silence again. This time it was warm. Naomi leaned back against the cool brick wall, her body finally relaxing after days of anticipation. Julian did the same. Above them, the sky was a soft navy stars just beginning to make themselves known. He looked over at her, voice almost teasing now. Do I get to at least hold your hand? Naomi didn't answer. She reached over, slid her fingers into his. That was enough. That was everything. Inside the venue, the lights dimmed, automatically set to a timer she'd programmed the week before. A soft glow remained just enough to see the outlines of the walls, the warmth of the textures, the evidence of her presence everywhere. A space that once felt like a shell was now a home. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she claimed it. A week later, the email came. Subject line, feature opportunity. Elle Design Quarterly. They wanted Naomi on the cover, not just for the venue, for the voice behind it, for being one of the few black women to lead a project of this scope, of this impact. She stared at the screen, unread email, open heart still, not racing, not overwhelmed, just thoughtful. A few years ago, she would have called her mom, her girls, maybe even Marcus, just to hear her name reflected in someone else's pride. But now, she just sat with it, not because she wasn't proud, but because she didn't need anyone else to hold it for her anymore. She replied the next day, thanked them, declined the cover, suggested they feature 3 other black women designers from her local network, instead brilliant, underexposed Ready. The editor was gracious, surprised, even a little insistent. But Naomi held the line. She didn't need the spotlight to feel seen. She'd already built something that spoke louder than any headline ever could. That afternoon, she went by the studio. Julian was there, hunched over a materials table, sleeves, rolled hair, a mess, pencil behind one ear. He looked up, grinned when he saw her. You came. I work here, remember? Sure. But lately you've been floating in and out like some elusive genius. Naomi smirked. You say that like it's a problem. He held up his hands, not complaining. She walked over, sat beside him, pulled a small envelope from her tote. I got offered a cover story. Julian's eyes widened. You serious? Yep. Turned it down. His brows lifted. You sure? Naomi shrugged. They don't need my face. They need the story. And the story's bigger than me. Julian leaned back, studying her like he was trying to memorize this version of her, too. You keep doing that. Doing what? Choosing grace over ego. Naomi chuckled. You say that like I don't have an ego. Oh, you definitely have one. But it's honest. Earned. She gave him a sideways look. What's that supposed to mean? Julian reached under the table and pulled out a small flat box wrapped in craft paper and twine. For you. Naomi frowned. What is this? Just open it. She unwrapped it carefully, slow, deliberate, like every movement had weight. Inside was a custom-made wood frame. Inside the glass, 6 of her earliest cards preserved. The ink slightly faded, the edges imperfect. You survived it. That's the whole sentence. You are not small. Your worth isn't waiting for permission. If I have to shrink, leave me. You are allowed to be chosen. Today, this is enough. Beneath the last card in small embossed letters, he'd added a 7th, built by her own hands. Naomi stared at it for a long time, said nothing. Julian didn't rush her. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. This is the most thoughtful thing anyone's ever done for me. Julian rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly shy. Just felt like it deserved to be seen, not sold, not pitched, just seen. Naomi looked at him full on now, then reached for his hand and held it. No fanfare, no declarations, just a simple, steady touch that said, I see you too. That night they walked the venue together. No guests, no event, just them, and the silence of a space that no longer echoed it resonated. Julian paused near the wall of light installations. You know what I keep thinking? Naomi tilted her head. What? This place started with an idea, but it didn't come alive until you showed up. Naomi didn't deflect this time, didn't brush it off or shrink beneath it. She just nodded, because it was true, and she was done pretending truth made her uncomfortable. Outside, they sat on the same front steps as before, side by side. No stage lights, just street lamps and the city breathing around them. Julian looked over. So what now? Naomi leaned her head gently against his shoulder. Now we keep building. He smiled. Together. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The way she reached for his hand again said more than any yes ever could. A breeze moved through the air. Not cold, not warm, just honest. Subscribe to Black HerStory Told if you believe stories like hers deserve to be heard.